This year has us all wanting to be healthier, and that includes our eye health. But how do you get vision coverage if you're retiring? It's actually pretty easy. VSP, the vision coverage many people get through work, offers individual vision plans. Enroll anytime, on any device, and start using your benefits the same day. You don't need to be an employee to get employee-level vision coverage. Visit vspdirect.com today. That's vspdirect.com.
I'm Bob Sullivan, the new host of AARP's The Perfect Scam podcast. And with Frank Abagnale and other top fraud experts, we're bringing you brand new episodes of America's most shocking scam stories.
I got an email alerting me to 22 accounts that had been opened up in my name.
Scam was masterfully designed.
New episodes available now. Subscribe to The Perfect Scam podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, it's another film study as we look back at Week 14. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing well. I mean, after a late night game, we finally, after this week, get to go back to Sundays for football.
You know, I can't even tell you how much of a day on the beach it'll be to have a Sunday 1 p.m. game. It just screws up your whole sleep schedule to have analyze all night after a night game. It just sucks.
Yeah, I'm not jealous for your schedule right now on having to do that. But hey, at least it was a Monday night and not a Tuesday or a Wednesday that you're trying to then cram in everything.
Right. We're getting back, but these 6-day weeks, honestly, they're really constraining what the production material we have. Anyway.
All right. Well, our guest today is everybody knows if you're on Twitter, which I assume, or Facebook or any type of social media, it's Cassie Calvert, who does all the social media stuff for the Ravens. You'll see her on videos interviewing all the players throughout the week and a whole lot more. How's it going?
It's good, and I can relate to your earlier conversation. It was a late night for me as well. I will be very, very happy to have a Sunday 1 p.m. kickoff after this wild Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday ride we have been on. So I feel you on that one.
Do you travel with a team, Cassie?
This year, no. Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, everything is kind of super wacky. In a normal year, yes. So that is the one benefit, is that I am home in bed a lot earlier than when we're on the road. But you definitely miss the atmosphere of, especially the plane rides home from a victory like that are insane. So definitely a little jealous on that one. But I tuned into Marlon Humphrey's victory IG Live. So it kind of made me feel like I was there, but not the same. But I definitely missed that this year.
All right, outstanding. Certainly, we're thrilled to have you here. Felt like a playoff game, I think, this last one. Did you get that kind of vibe to it, too?
Absolutely. And I mean, in a certain way, it kind of is at this point. All the rest of them really are playoff games. It's win and get in. And you don't want to leave it down to having the Dolphins or the Browns have to lose a certain number of games. It still kind of is to a certain extent. But, the Ravens control their own fate to a certain extent at this point. And I think that everyone kind of has adopted that mindset, which is huge. And, I looked back at the Cleveland Browns game in, was that 2016 with the CJ Mosley interception at the end of the game. And I thought, nothing's going to top that, sending us to the playoffs, or the Will Hill kick six, something like that on Monday Night Football in Cleveland. And then this game certainly delivered, just all the twists and turns at the end. I think Coach Harbaugh said after the game, Hollywood could not have written a better script than that. And so it made the late night worth it, it certainly had all the elements you could ask for. And I think this is one we'll certainly be talking about for years to come.
Yeah, I want to get back to that topic, because I think you can make the argument that it was the greatest Ravens game of all time. But before we get to that, Josh has something to tell us.
All right. I was going to say that I agree. And there's only one game that I could relate this to. But let's get to the MyBookie ad first. MyBookie, is sponsoring Film Study every week. We're constantly telling you guys. And, hey, if you got on with the Ravens yesterday and that 3.5-point spread, you made some money yesterday on MyBookie thanks to the Browns at the end of that game. So head on over to MyBookie, make your deposit using the Ravens, and they'll match you halfway, giving you a head start on building your bankroll. For instance, if you put in $200 and use the promo code RAVENS, you'll get an extra $100 to play with. Joining and depositing is a simple process too, and it's quick. But more importantly, when it's time to get paid, that's quick too. So treat yourself to some extra cash in your pocket this holiday season by investing in your intuition. So head on over to MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to support Film Study.
All right, let's get back to this notion that this might have been the greatest regular season game in history. And I think we have to qualify it, because I think if we look at the Mile High Miracle and all of the drama in that game, just the importance of the game would be ahead of it. I look to other games, playoff games in Ravens history, the 2000 game at Tennessee as being a really exceptional drama game. Certainly the AFC Championship in 2012 was another one. But there are certainly playoff games that would fit in this category. But in terms of a regular season game, I think you can really make the case this is the greatest. And so what I wanted to try and do was come up with one other game in history that I thought was close, at least. So the game I wanted to compare us to was the classic 2003 44-41 overtime win against Seattle. That was at home, of course. A great game. The Ravens rallied from 17 down with just over 6 minutes to play to come back, tie it in regulation, win in overtime on a Stover field goal. But that game had everything. And I wanted to compare individual elements and really see what we had in that game. But you start off with the drama of the 2020 game, which certainly was Monday Night Football, had this wonderful back and forth drama nature to it that really maintained kind of a consistent level throughout the game. Didn't it, Cassie?
Certainly. And I think that is really going to be something for years to come with this. We have Baker Mayfield of the Browns and Lamar Jackson of the Ravens, these two young quarterbacks. It's just the NFL loves the young, talented quarterback drama. And then you add in everything else, the Tyus Bowser interception, the Lamar running to the locker room, just the back and forth of the game. And I just say, like, you could not write a script better than that. I loved the back and forth. A little stressful as someone who's trying to get tweets off and cut highlights. When I can't even keep up with the highlights, that's when I know it's a good game.
All right. So this game, of course, played in front of only, I don't know how many fans. Might have been 10,000, might have been 15,000. It seemed like a little bit larger crowd than I'm used to for this year. Do you happen to know how many?
I think you're right. I think it's about at that 10,000 mark, which is kind of wild because at this point, the Browns are one of the few stadiums that are still allowing fans, which is kind of jarring, in a year like this when we're not used to hearing that. But I kind of liked it, having the fans and the atmosphere. It definitely adds to that drama when you can hear the boos and the cheers, and it's not just that constant crowd noise you've been getting on TV broadcasts.
Yeah, they did a good job with really talking about that and make it. If you go back to the 2003 game with Seattle, with the Ravens out of it, frankly, for most of that game and most of the second half anyway, a lot of fans had left. And the fans that were remaining were making as much noise as if a full stadium was there, which was really weird. But, I'm one of these people who always stays to the end. And then we had people to meet afterwards, and it's a perfect situation because they'd already eaten their chicken wings and stuff at the bar. And, we we go to meet them, and they're already finished they're on their second plate and whatnot. It's pretty funny. But anyway, I in terms of drama, that 2003 game had so many consecutive precipices that I really think in drama, it's pretty much a tie between those two games. And I know we've got some people who are probably younger listeners who don't really remember that 2003 game. It's going to be hard for me to make you commit to that. But what I will say is if you can go out and find that game, whether it's online or through a friend or whatever who might have a copy of it, great game to go back and watch if you have the chance.
I love that the fans kind of evened out there, because that's the thing that I feel like it's so hard to compare games this year to historical games because you miss that atmosphere. So I love that you found that similarity there. That's great.
Well, let's talk playoff significance because that's another element. The Ravens were 5-5, in danger of obviously dropping to 5-6. They ended up going on a 5-1 run under Anthony Wright, of all people, in 2003 in order to make the playoffs. In fact, to win the division at 10-6. And this team, the 2020 team, we just don't know yet. Obviously, if they pivot and that 4th and 5 play becomes the springboard to a Super Bowl run, this game is going to go to number 1 easily. But in terms of play of significance now, I'm not sure we really know yet.
You're certainly right. If the Ravens can't keep this rolling in the last couple of games of the season, this one, the significance changes very, very quickly here. We got to keep the momentum going at that point.
The human interest angles were interesting between these two games. In 2003, had a fantastic human interest angle to it. It was Anthony Wright, whose wife was going into labor that night. In fact, Billick gave her a game ball for deferring inducing labor until after the game. And I don't remember if this was his first child, but it's a child. And that should be a bigger human interest angle than everything. But this is a case where the status of the athlete magnifies the thing. So Lamar Jackson running to the bathroom or changing his shoes is a bigger human interest story than Anthony Wright having a child, which doesn't really seem fair. And yet that's life.
I think part of it too is like sports Twitter these days. Any fun moment like that gets magnified a million times when it becomes viral. And you enter Lamar Jackson, this electric quarterback who's already a household name, and then you add in bathroom humor, and it just doesn't get better than that for sports Twitter. Like, this is what people live for. And I love that Paul Pierce even like commented on it today.
Yes.
And those are things that you don't have like before sports Twitter is a thing. So and as a social media nerd, like those are the things that I love, from anything from that to, Trace McSorley going in the game and TikTok goes wild. And then you have him obviously, unfortunately, getting hurt, but then he's cheering on the sideline and that moment gets captured with the fan's cell phone, and he's pumped when Lamar throws that touchdown to Hollywood Brown. And I get chills just like thinking about it, because that's like the spirit of this team. And that's part of what I love about my job, is that I get to like take these moments and share them with our fans. And I think that just makes it all the more special, So I gotta go. I'm biased, but I love 2020 on this one. It just doesn't get better than all the jokes people are getting off on this game.
I would agree that in terms of that, there's certainly 2020 is the winner on this one. In terms of statistical oddities, there was an incredible number in both games. The 9 touchdowns rushing in this game is the most in NFL history. 1922 games are being compared. The 2020 game also included the most first downs allowed ever by the Ravens. After they'd allowed the 7th most or 8th most first downs in team history last week to the Cowboys, they allowed 33 again. So defense has some holes right now. If I go back to the 2003 game, though, Marcus Robinson scored 4 touchdowns. That's never happened by a Ravens receiver otherwise. Ed Reed blocked the 4th and last punt of his NFL career. It was only his second year, only about 25 games into his career, maybe 29 games in. But anyway, he blocked the punt and returned that for a touchdown. Both teams had exactly 426 yards. That's just kind of an oddity. And the Seahawks quarterback, Matt Hasselbeck, had 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and lost the football game. Incredible. I think 2003 wins that category. Not sure how important it is, but I think they win that category. All right, move on to analytics moments. Well, this game had a couple. The first was being down 14, the Browns went for 2, which is unusual. Billick did it once in 2001. No other coach had done it for a long time. It's the right play statistically for analytics nerds out there. It was one of the things I look for when I look at a 2-point conversion chart, is that when you're down 8, the break-even probability of getting the 2-point conversion has to be 38%, or there's something wrong with the chart. And 38.2% is the number. It's by the way, thank you, Mrs. Millar, for making me learn the binomial theorem. Actually, the binomial theorem, whatever it's called, quadratic equation. Sorry, the quadratic equation. You have to use that to solve it. But thank you anyway for teaching me that. It's the only use I've actually found, even though I'm an actuary. And that was a cool one. The other analytics moment that I thought was kind of neat was the pass to Hollywood in the wide open. Would the Ravens actually have been better off if he hadn't have scored on that play? The defense obviously having a lot of problems.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point too. And to go back to what you're talking about the Browns there, I think it's really interesting that I think not a lot of fans realize that the Browns and the Ravens are 2 of the organizations that have some of the biggest statistical or groups within their organization. Both have really invested in that. And I think these are the kind of plays where it really comes down to that. I'm close friends with Daniel Stern, and I know he's been like a buzz guy on Twitter. People love to know kind of behind the scenes with him, and he's up in the booth kind of helping Coach Harbaugh make those decisions. And I'm sure the Browns have a comparable person as well. But it's really interesting that these football coaches, and I think DaCosta is a huge part of that too. Mm-hmm. He's been huge in analytics and has really kind of buffed that up in his tenure as GM. But these guys, like, that's what their bread and butter is, and they're analyzing these situations throughout the week. And so he has a like a plan for every possible situation that could arouse. And he's in Coach Harbaugh's ear, telling him what decision to make. And obviously Coach Harbaugh at the end of the day has to make the decision on his own, but kind of giving him those statistical probabilities that you're talking about in each of those situations. So it's just fascinating to me that this is an entire career, like right there, making those judgment calls, going for two. That he's huge on fourth down as well. Like at what point on the field do you decide to go for it on fourth down? What yardage and where are you on the field? What plays into all of that? What plays have you been able to successfully run in the game so far? So they're crunching all those numbers, which is fascinating to me.
So Cassie, I'd ask you a question about Daniel's job. Do you know, are they now allowed to use computers on that headset loop? There was a time when they weren't. Anyway, if you don't know the answer, I'd love to hear from you at some point if you can ask Daniel that. I asked about it about 9 years ago when Matt Weiss was the guy on the headset loop, and they were not allowed to use computers at that time, but they all have those surface machines on the sideline. Seems like that would have some calculation abilities.
I think you're right. I think computers, I'm not 1,000% sure, but I think computers is still not the case. But I do think that they've done a lot of that in advance, like a lot of the mathematical things that they need to do. So they're kind of prepared for any situation that could arise.
Right. I agree. I've thought about how you would do that if you didn't have a computer, and it'd be easy to have a set of worksheets that you use a grease pencil in a book or whatever, and you could do it pretty quickly. So it wouldn't be it's definitely a solvable problem that you wouldn't need a calculator for.
Sometimes I think my job is stressful, and then I remember people are doing math in the middle of a football game, and I'm like, I just send the tweets.
All right. I wanted to talk also about memorable individual plays and compare that to the 2003 and 2020 games. The 2020 game certainly has the 4th and 5 play, which will go down as one of the greatest in Ravens history and one of the ones we'll always remember. One of the statistics I heard today about that is that at the snap of that play, the Ravens had a 56% chance to make the playoffs. You probably saw this already? Okay, so after the completion to Brown went for the touchdown, 82% chance to make the playoffs. 26% leverage on one play. So,
and you felt that, like it's one of those things, like I felt that 30% change, like that just, it turned everything around so quickly. And it's crazy to see that statistically that's the case as well.
Yeah. Outrageous. There were other memorable plays in this game. I thought McSorley's 3rd and 10 completion to Snead was an absolutely huge play that, it may be the last completion of McSorley's career. We'd have to think that's a reasonable possibility. I know the injury does not seem as serious anymore, but he's not going to play the rest of this regular season, probably wouldn't play in the postseason. Next year, there'll come a decision point on whether he's the backup or not. So it's always a question, but boy, was that an important throw in this game.
Absolutely right. And I think that's super underrated. I don't think that many people are talking about that. And just Willie Snead performance in these last couple of games, regardless, like he has become, especially in Mark Andrews' absence, he's become that guy that's just, he's going to catch the ball. He's going to make the play. And I give props to Trace for coming out there and making that play. And that's not a game he's expecting to go in, and just such a wild situation to make that play and set us up well. And Lamar is able to, thankfully, to come out there and finish the game. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough decision for in the quarterback room come the offseason this year.
So if you think about the plays that are very memorable from 2003, they not only had the Reed punt block. Ray Lewis, after a face mask penalty, had given Seattle a first down, pulled the ball away from the fullback, and one of the most incredible induced fumbles I've ever seen. Wright had a 4th and 28 completion that went for 44 yards. It was tipped by Robinson to Sanders for a completion. They had an OPI call with 39 seconds left that put the Ravens in field goal range. They stopped the Seahawks on 4th and 1. Whole bunch of things went on. They had a completion in overtime. There are probably 15 plays individually in that game that were just so memorable. I just don't think the 2020 game is on the same level in terms of that kind of remarkable. So I'd give 2003 the advantage in this case.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you have off the top of my head, I'd go like the Tucker kick, that Hollywood Brown touchdown. And you have probably that Trace McSorley, Willie Snead play to set all that up. And other than that, it was a crazy game, but there's not those, those specific plays. Now in the moment, they're fantastic because of what the situation is. But I also that Mark Andrews first down where they extended that play. That's another one. But, the touchdowns in that game were not the thrilling part because so much of that had already happened.
Yep, I agree completely. The overcoming adversity, while the 4th and 5 TD was fairly remarkable, the 2003 team in that game got pushed to the precipice about 10 times, I'm going to say, where any result would have lost them the game. And the Ravens were never in that dire a situation until 4th and 5, that it was then or never to win that game. So that I think 2003 gets it that way. Everybody's going to make their own choice on this, and people of this generation are going to choose this game as the greatest. Whereas people of my generation, I'll call it, since I've been here since the beginning, will take either that Jacksonville 2000 game or that 2003 game against the Seattle. I'm trying not to review this as there is any particular golden age, because I think this is the golden age of the Ravens right now. I'm trying to just analyze these two games fairly and see which is one. I think 2003, for the moment, is ahead. But if this is the start of a playoff springboard, maybe this becomes the game.
I think there might be like a little twinge of nostalgia in there too, which is fair. Like I think in 17 years from now, this is going to be a little more nostalgic as well. But I feel you on that. And I think that you're right. I think that we are in a really special age of Ravens football. This is the first time that I'm aware of where you've had such an exciting offense and such a dominant defense. And I think the Ravens of the past, you've always had that defensive mentality, and just to have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson and to have him on his rookie contract for years to come and know that you'll have him as a Raven, it's exciting. And I think that it's such a flip. When I first came and we had Joe Flacco and great quarterback, but the offense is not what people are talking about the next day,
Mm-hmm.
And you're at this point where you have this marvelous quarterback who can make a play at any moment and make something special happen. And the Ravens have always had that on defense, but to have it on both sides of the ball is just especially remarkable. And that's a credit to Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh for building this team and Ozzie Newsome the way that they have. But I will be excited to see what this team can do in the future. And, at the end of the day, it comes down to winning Super Bowls. So if they can make that happen, then I think certainly this would be the golden age to me.
These last two games, do they feel different to you in terms of Lamar Jackson coming back?
Absolutely. And I think he talked about that, like coming back from COVID, he just kind of had this renewed joy, he's always a joyful guy, always happy to be playing football, loves the game. No one has ever doubted that. But when you have something taken away from you for 2 weeks and you can't do what you love, I think it just really gives you that extra appreciation. And he has been so fired up to be back every day. Guys are talking about how happy he is at practice, just to do the little things. Guys were excited to get back in the weight room when they got back. And Carbs is like, I have never heard guys so excited to go get their lift in, So I think it just really magnifies that. And I think he plays when he's loose and he's happy, he plays like Lamar Jackson. And that is a very, very special thing. I think just some things have kind of come together, at the same time. We're getting guys healthy as well. All those things have kind of lined up. And even I looked at that Steelers game, it just felt different, like you have guys out there who not our starting lineup. We were going through all the COVID restrictions and guys were on the COVID list, and just the battle, like the fight that I saw in that team that week, it really changed the tone of the season for me. Now we've got guys healthy and have kind of bought into that, and it just that momentum shift I think has been huge, and that is definitely big going down the stretch, the end of a football season. So I think one thing that was tough about last year is I think a lot of people felt that we peaked too early, and so if December is when we're getting hot, that is never a bad thing for December football.
Yeah, the early Harbaugh years were full of great December football that got him into the playoffs, and they were having a battle for these final weeks to guarantee their spot in several of those years, 2008 at least, 2009 also. So, and they made good deep playoff runs both of those years, at least to the divisional round once the AFC Championship. So I want to go back to a point you made also about getting healthy at the right time, because there's one position where the Ravens can't seem to stay healthy, and that's a cornerback. They activated only 6 defensive backs for this game. I think the weather probably had something to do with it. Now, Cassie, you probably saw on social media or on wherever that there were 25 plus mile per hour winds were forecast for the game.
Yeah, and I don't think that really materialized quite like people thought it was going to, but the weather in Cleveland is never great. And you saw missed kicks, and that the way that the wind kind of shuffles through that stadium, it's just right there in the water, it's freezing there always, first of all, and just adding the elements of weather in, you're totally right. Like that definitely plays a factor in the game. And Tucker even talked about that a little at the end of the game. He's like, I don't ever want to make it sound like that my job is harder than it actually is, but like lining up to take that kick, the wind swirling, and you have to factor all of that in. And obviously he successfully did, but definitely a factor in making game decisions for sure.
Yeah. In terms of what the Ravens did in this game, they activated 5 defensive linemen, which I thought was very important against the Browns because they play very heavy sets, and the Ravens were going to probably have to play more base defense. Well, not only did they have to play more base defense, which we're going to get to, they also had to play a lot more defensive snaps because the Browns really won the snap count battle pretty significantly. So it ended up being a very big deal that they did activate that 5th defensive lineman. Madubuike was there. He played well. Honestly, Calais Campbell, who was there, did not play particularly well, and they really needed him to take less snaps as the game went on in this one.
Yeah, he's a guy who's been just kind of dealing with a lot. He didn't practice most of last week. He's just came off the COVID list. He's a guy that has asthma, high risk. He tweeted that COVID hit him pretty hard, so he's still feeling the effects of that, even before that, dealing with the calf injury. So he's kind of a guy that's still trying to work his way back. I think it was a game time decision. He got out on the field pre-game. The trainers kind of walked him through it, looked at if he was going to be able to play or not, and didn't look great, to be honest. Like the reporters there reporting that he was kind of walking gingerly off the field, still was able to go and played some snaps like you talked about. But yeah, I think he's still just like trying to get back healthy. And he's obviously, when he is healthy, he's dominant out there. So hopefully that's something that can happen down the stretch here and we can get him back at full capacity if the Ravens are able to make the playoffs.
Okay, so the Ravens went with only 8 defensive backs active for the games, 4 corners and 4 safeties. Their 4 safeties really include 2 dedicated special teams players, and Anthony Levine, who has played defense before, and Jordan Richards, who never plays defense, even though he did in Atlanta. And Richards got a snap, which is very unusual, on the final play of the game, which is more like a special teams play. Levine got 5 snaps as the slot corner, 2 other at safety during this game, which is a big workload for him. He was a great dime in 2018. We're a couple of years past that. Anthony Levine is not the same player he was, and they're not relying on him for dime defense anymore. So they really only left themselves 6 defensive backs for 5 spots that they use in their nickel. And of course, they got 2 injuries. And now they're down to 4 defensive backs for 5 spots they have to play in the nickel. And the Browns know it. And they're putting on mostly 11 personnel and trying to force the Ravens into the nickel, which meant that they had to go with Levine at slot corner for a while. They had to at first put Harris in, and they did some targeting of him. But what I want to focus on was who they activated in order that they had to activate only 6 defensive backs they really wanted to use, or 8 in total. And there are 3 guys on the roster that come to mind. The first is Mark Ingram, who played only 1 snap.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have brought this up in the last 24 hours, and I will be interested to see how it plays out going forward because, to your point, his snaps have extremely gone down in the last couple of games, even coming back off the COVID list and everything. So if you're not playing, using an active roster spot, and you have Anthony Averett inactive, especially with Jimmy Smith battling injuries here, and we don't know what his status will look like for the next game. So that roster spot becomes really, really valuable. Even some of the practice squad guys that they're able to call up on game day now due to the COVID rules this year, that last spot is going to be very highly contested. And I don't see how going forward you don't have Anthony Averett active on game day. They were really, really excited to get him back. Wing talked about him activating him back off IR. And I think part of it too plays into that he is coming off an injury still and still working him back. But I think that going forward, this is the time, bread and butter for him to earn his money. Like, you got to show up and show out because Jimmy has just been battling through it all year. And you see Marcus Peters go down in the game, and he's been working through injuries all season. He's clearly not healthy and is still going out there and playing. Coach Harbaugh actually shared kind of a funny story after the game that Marcus just went back on the field. Like, no one really cleared him to go back after his injury. And their coach is like, Marcus is out there, and turns to our trainer, Ron, and is like, did you clear Marcus to go back there? He's like, Marcus is on the field. And so Marcus just decided he wanted this game won, and he went out there and was going to do something about it. And I think that's just kind of his mentality. He's a dog out there, and he is always going to go out there and make the play. But he is, again, just not healthy. And we got to, like, Eric DaCosta always says you can never have enough corners, and this is why, because we're in December and we need more corners. And you kind of looked at the roster going into training camp, we're like, the Ravens have all this depth in the secondary, and the guys they do have are fantastic, but you never have enough corners, and Anthony Averett is going to have to be out there going forward.
Yeah, I love that story because I didn't know that. First of all, and second of all, the announcers were kind of making fun of the fact that maybe Peter's pride was hurt on that touchdown. Where
Yeah, I did not like that. Yeah, they were like, it was his ego. He wasn't actually hurt. Like, no, he was not even cleared to be back there in the field. That Marcus Peters is not an ego kind of guy when it comes to his game. So I just love his mentality, his ferociousness. I mean, we've seen it in primetime games. I always loved that Rams game last season where, he had the little bit of extra juice that game, little revenge there, but he always shows out in primetime, and he loves game of football, and you can definitely tell.
Yeah, he's very smart about everything he does on the football field, particularly in terms of jumping a route, but he's also selectively physical in a way that is very smart. And it's exactly how I want my cornerbacks to play. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them always to be third man into the pile, even if they have a chance to maybe punch for the football loose. It's a percentage game at that point. He really needs to make sure he can play all the snaps he can because he's the best we have other than Humphrey.
Yeah, you're so right. I think that's such an underrated part of his game is he's so cerebral and he watches so much film. And I think people don't talk about that enough. Like he's a little like Ed Reed to me in that way, like he knows what the quarterback's tendencies are. And Marlon Humphrey has talked a lot about learning that from him as they've been together the last 2 years. Like he watches all the film. He wants to know what the quarterback's going to do. And so it enables him to kind of make those in-game decisions and make it a little more instinctual when you're in the game and you've done all that preparation. The guys always talk about how well Marcus knows the game, and it definitely shows in his own game in that way.
All right. Well, let's move on to the defensive line. They activated 5 defensive linemen in this game. Campbell's loss of effectiveness obviously impacted the situation in terms of who they had to get snaps out of. Wink Martindale, master of snap count. We always talk about this on this show, is how well he manages to keep players rested, keep the team in good shape for the fourth quarter when other teams can't even draw a breath oftentimes against the Ravens offense. The Ravens defense can still be effective at that point. Wolf and Iron Man so far this year.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Wink is such a wizard, and he was praising Wolf this week. He just said, or Brandon Williams actually said that he's going to hunt like that. It's in his name, he's the Wolf, and he's going to go out there and hunt. And he has been so clutch for the Ravens this year. I mean, obviously you can't foresee Calais getting injured, Brandon Williams getting put on the COVID list twice, Calais getting put on the COVID list, but Derek Wolf has just been a dog in there. And then we thought we were going to have, 3 of them, the trio all season long, and that has not been the case. But Derek Wolf that roster move has just looked better and better to me as the season goes on. Again, you can't predict all those things are going to happen, but thank goodness we have had him in there because I do not know with both of those guys out what we would have done. And I think that he has been a huge, great fit in this defense. The guys all love him. I think he's been a really natural locker room fit as well. He's really bought in, and I think that it's paid off in the field 100%.
Very exciting to hear them talking about an extension for him. So that's one of the things we've really been looking forward to. I've made the point during this season and before it that the Ravens need to get younger, need to expend draft picks on the defensive line because all their talent now, with the exception of Madubuike, is 30 and up. So they really need to find a way to get the right guy extended out of this, which I think might be Wolf at this point. They got 1 more year of Campbell, 1 more year of Williams, right? That's correct.
Yeah, I believe so.
And no more years of Wolf if they don't re-sign him.
Right.
So they probably want to re-sign him, and they probably want to at least spend 1 draft pick on the defensive line, and they don't have a whole lot of draft picks coming this year.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think that's one where some of the guys have become in strikeouts, and you've got to hit on those picks as well, or making those defensive line picks. They can't always be the end of the draft kind of guys, when you want that guy who's going to be able to come in and contribute quickly. Really excited about what we've seen from Madubuike so far. I really hope that he can further develop. I love that the guys have really taken him under their wing. Pernell McPhee especially, always talks about him. But you're right, you kind of have to have someone to tie you over in the meantime. And looking forward, I think Derek Wolf is a great fit there. I think this offseason is going to be tough because there are a lot of guys due for extensions, and the money is going to make some decisions challenging this year for sure. But I do think that they'll look to get some depth there in the draft in April.
Yeah. Madubuike, I couldn't be more excited about his game. I thought it was probably his best so far. A couple pressures, played the run well, pursued well down the line of scrimmage. I loved everything about what he did in this game. Let's talk packages for a minute. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly here, but if you want to say anything at all, we'll fit you right in. Jumbo, we talk about that 3 defensive backs. They didn't play a single snap of that. They never got into a goal-to-go situation inside the 5-yard line. So not too surprising that would happen. I mentioned the high percentage of base snaps. That's the regular 3-4 defense. They used that against a 12 and 13 personnel 24 times. I think they had 6 yards per play on that. I'm not looking at my totals right here, and I ought to be doing that. So let's make sure I bring up the right thing here. All right, I will. Anyway, 144 yards. Jumbo nickel, they played 6 snaps. Now, that's a package we talk about on this show a little bit, but 1 inside linebacker, but still 3 down linemen. So it's a fairly large commitment to defensive line total snaps in there. That was effective. 6 plays, 24 yards, and the Bowser interception came down a jumbo nickel. They used that against 11 personnel. It's just a different sort of a look every once in a while that they want to use instead of the standard nickel in that situation.
Yeah, sorry. Baker Mayfield actually talked about that at the end of after the Browns in the post game, and just the vision that he didn't see Tyus Bowser there, a little deception there as he came across, and Tyus just had great vision on that play. Judon talked about it after the game. They actually did their post game press conference together, and Tyus is a guy I know we'll get to him in a little bit, but super underrated. And I just thought it was great vision on him to get in there and make that play with the one-handed catch as well. I love that.
Yeah, that is a very difficult catch. It's a difficult catch for a receiver to make, but it's definitely a difficult catch for a linebacker to make. And Tyus Bowser's coverage ability is so underrated. He is by far, it's not even close that he's the best coverage linebacker on the Ravens. And that is so rare that's an outside linebacker as opposed to an inside linebacker. Very, very rare. So we're already talking about one of the most valuable Sam linebackers in the league. He hasn't done too much on the pass rush because they use him so much to drop the coverage in these third down situations. But when he does, he rushes the passer effectively as well. I hope the Ravens are able to re-sign him, and he's the kind of guy that maybe this is a good year where you sign him for 3 years and it's just that much less. But I unfortunately, I kind of feel like he's going to get paid this offseason.
Yeah, 3 interceptions the last 4 games. You know, he's not going to fly under the radar much longer, and he's got a payday coming for him for sure. I would love the Ravens to lock him down. One of the best attitudes on the team. Great, just great all around dude. So very, very happy for his success.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. The standard nickel, they played 26 times. That's a regular two down linemen, 2 outside linebackers, 2 inside linebackers, 26 plays, 148 yards on that. Nothing, by the way, so far has been that great, but we're going to get to the package that really beat the Ravens in a moment. The alternate base package is one they use that kind of is like a big nickel. Now, they've been using Chris Board on the field as a proxy safety, as I call it. The Ravens don't have a third safety on this team that they really want to put in the game. So they have their 2 safeties, and thank God they haven't gotten hurt. They're basically playing every single snap. But then they use Chris Board as what would normally be a dime back on those typical third and medium, third and long situations. They also use him as a third inside linebacker in what would be a big nickel formation where he plays kind of slot corner. So they've got a lot of different uses for Chris Board.
Yeah, he's just a really athletic guy. And a lot of guys have talked about that coming out of college. You know, he is one of the most athletic guys at his school. So I just think that Wink is just, you know, again, a wizard, very attuned to like all the versatility of his players. And he's going to use guys in ways that he can. And Chris Board's athleticism, I think, really plays into that for sure.
Yeah. All right. They've been, during the Wink era, they made a tremendous use of extra outside linebackers on the field. And that's why the Ravens can have 5 active outside linebackers on game day where most other teams can only really take 4. But they use this rush nickel package where they use 3 outside linebackers. They did that 6 times in this game. Moderately successful, 6 plays, 34 yards. They had it in at the end of the half. They have it in on some other plays during the game where it was second and medium. Race car nickel was the package they played 11 times. Now that's the 4 outside linebacker package. So by the way, Cassie, I don't know if you know this. It never had been used before 2018 when we got here that the Ravens had put 4 outside linebackers on the field at one time. Never before used. They did it 6 times that year. Almost every play was remarkably successful. In fact, they did 3 times against Buffalo. It was sack, interception, sack in that game. 3 more times against Denver. Net of 0 yards on all the plays for the year. And then in 2019, it suddenly was 13.2% of the snaps for the entire season. A lot of that fueled by the fact that the Ravens led most of the year, but they played that defense more than they played the base defense all of a sudden. And defense that just pretty much, I'll call it invented the year before, just discovered to be valuable the year before.
And I love having a defensive mind like that who is inventing things,
Yeah.
like that's huge for the Ravens, a team that's always defensive minded. But I think that having that guy who's in there, I am praying, praying, praying that the day never comes when Wink Martindale takes a head coach job, because I
Yeah.
think the Ravens will be truly missing him. But I just think he's been a great fit. Again, being able to use the players that he has in creative and inventive ways, I think has made the Ravens such a challenge to face defensively.
Yeah, I assume Wink wants a head coaching job, but maybe if there's not too much difference in the money, if you can make half as much as a defensive coordinator with the Ravens, would he still want to keep that job? I'm like somehow hoping that could work out, but there's going to come a time, I'm sure, when they can't keep him anymore. He's too damn good.
It worked for Eric DaCosta. He
Mhm.
waited quite a long time after Ozzie Newsome, so maybe it'll work for Wink Martindale too.
Yeah, do you get the sense that a lot of that was Lacey and her career that kept Eric around, or do you think it was really based on Eric and what's going on? Because my understanding, she's a doctor, correct?
I'm not sure exactly, but she's great. She definitely has Baltimore roots. Her dad was a big part of Baltimore as well, of the Ravens, and I think that it's really my understanding has always been that it's really part of it is his relationship with Ozzy. I think he just really relished working directly with him. They're such good friends. He was such a great mentor to him, and they have such a great relationship. And I think knowing that eventually that was a possibility for him obviously was huge, and that was kind of a promise in there at some point, as it kind of progressed. But I think he really relished working for that. They love having their family here. They've built a life together, to your point, locally, and they love the Baltimore community. Lacey's a huge part of that. She's always doing great things on Twitter for the Baltimore community. And I think they really just love being here. Obviously DaCosta's a Boston guy originally, but I think that Baltimore has really been a great fit for them. And I think I love that he made that decision for his family. I think a lot of times you see GMs take these roles at teams, where it's not the greatest fit personality wise or family wise or like culture wise, and I think it's prudent and smart, recognize that you have a good situation and that this is going to be the best opportunity for you. Because I think as a general manager, if you don't have success the first time, it's really, really hard to continue that. And I think he knew that Baltimore would be a place where he could have success versus going to a team, that's coming off a 2-14 season or whatever, and doesn't have draft picks to work with, and kind of being able to obviously have a role in building the team going forward and helping make some of those decisions that would later set you up when you are GM. And I think that it's just been a really natural transition, which is great for players. It's great for agents. It's great for people like me in the organization who already have a relationship with the guy who comes in and takes over as general manager, and just makes it a much more successful move for an organization versus, bringing in a guy who has a completely different philosophy. And I think that's a credit to Steve Bisciotti for, kind of aligning that, and Harbaugh just having great relationships with both of them, which is, again, just such an underrated thing that the Ravens are blessed to have, a head coach and a GM who work so well together.
Yeah, for them to even be able to flip roles and still be around is remarkable. But I want to go back to Bisciotti for a second, because I think his presence as a guy who's made his career with a lot of good hiring decisions, and being really smart about that. I don't mean made his NFL career. I mean made his whole business career based on this. What I was impressed with probably the most of Bisciotti's stuff since he's been with the Ravens, and there's been a lot of things I've been very impressed with, was when they hired John Harbaugh in 2008, they sent the season ticket holders out a magazine in the offseason telling exactly what their process had been to make that decision. And it's wonderfully well written. I took it to work and I handed it out to the senior management team, and I said, this is just fantastic. Everybody hands out their little books at work, like if Harry Potter ran GM and that sort of thing. This was a really cool and terse way to go ahead about interviewing and selecting a candidate that really made a ton of sense. And the Harbaugh hire was a great one. Bisciotti right at the top of the pyramid, obviously had a big hand in that one.
Absolutely. I think one of the most underrated things about the Ravens organization is that he's run it successfully as a business. I think you kind of look at these other teams and it's family run, and obviously that's really powerful, but it doesn't always come down to the best business decisions. And I think he's done a great job of steering the organization in a good direction, and that goes from making head coach and GM hiring decisions to, putting the right people in place on the business side as well to hire people beneath them to kind of oil the machine and keep it going,
Mhm.
like all the things that people don't see, the kind of less glamorous roles as well. And part of that is just treating your employees like successful, like a successful business treats their employees. You don't always see that. I've worked other places in the sports industry, and the way that employees are valued at the Ravens, whether you're a coach or you're on the business side, makes people happy, and it makes people feel valued and, work better for the team that they're employed by. And I think that just kind of propels the organization forward. And it's such a special part of the Ravens. And I think that's all credit to him, to your point.
It's great to hear that from somebody inside the organization. And I can tell you out there, it does impact who we can get as players in this town and what the product looks like in the field. I'm going to say one more thing about this is that Steve Bisciotti, while he runs this as a business, he doesn't run it as a tightly run family business like, say, the Bengals do, where you're almost stuck by constraint, have financial constraints that keep you from putting on the best product on the field. Steve Bisciotti put in, I think it was $32 million to build the rest of the castle in terms of cost overruns. That has paid enormous dividends for this team over the years. They've expanded it again, recently, but the investment in the castle itself has been one of the greatest recruiting inducements this team could have.
You're so right. And I think to your point, that pays off even in free agency. You look at what college football teams do to bring in recruits, and that doesn't stop when you get to the NFL. If a player walks into the Under Armour Performance Center, they're going to be impressed. And not to continually kick on them, but like the Bengals practice field is a bubble, and you're a player and you're looking at Cincinnati and it's the winter and you're going to be playing outside in a bubble, or you're going to be at the Ravens and have this beautiful indoor practice facility, like those decisions play a factor. You want to be somewhere where you're comfortable and can have success, and I think that's a huge part of recruiting free agent talent.
Yep, great point. I want to go back to the race car now. Let's get back to the defense a little bit. But they had 11 plays and gave up 132 yards, so 12 yards per play. One of the worst performances by this group of the season. But the last 5 times it was on the field, pass middle for 12, pass right for 21 in the touchdown, pass left for 30 on that first play of the touchdown drive, pass left for 16, and pass left for 22 for the touchdown to tie the game. Kind of a dog down the stretch for the defense, but it's been a package that's served Martindale well, certainly. And you know what? I don't know how you feel about this, Cassie, but I was happy the Browns scored when they did, because it gave the Ravens the chance to drive for the winning score. I was a lot more fearful that they would use up the entire clock and the game would come down to an overtime coin flip that would give the Ravens a lot less chance to win the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't want to see this game go to overtime. I wanted to be able to run it in regulation. And Matthew Judon was actually asked about that in the post-game press conference. And he was like, I wanted to get the stop there. I didn't want them to score at all. And so he wasn't really quite willing to jump on board with that logic. But I absolutely agree. You want to get the ball back with enough time there and just kind of get them off the field. If it's inevitable, it's inevitable. Let's move on. Let's get the ball back.
All right. And then, of course, Lamar did his thing and took him right down the field. Let's move on. 2 snaps a dime. We don't need to talk about that. Talk a little bit about the pass rush. Mayfield had ample time and space on 13 of 48 dropbacks. That's a 3-second pocket, as I define it, with room to step into the throw. It's ample because you don't very often get it. When you do get it, you really ought to make something of it. It's down to 27%, which is a little below average for this day and age. It's probably about 35% has been average, but it was as high as 50% 10 years ago when I started charting this on a regular basis. So definitely the amount of time that quarterbacks have and the focus on getting a fast pressure on the quarterback has been greater in recent years. What's exciting about this game, there were 15 balls that were out quickly. Let me make sure I have this correct. 16 balls are out quickly. So that accounts for 29 of them total. And then there were 19 pressure events on 48 dropbacks. That's a 40% rate. Really good rate for the Ravens in this game. Now, they didn't get sacks, but they did get 4 quarterback hits within 3 seconds. They got another quarterback hit that was after 3 seconds and led to an intentional grounding. And then they got 15 pressures within 3 seconds.
Yeah, I think the sack point is just that's been the one stat that's been missing the last couple of weeks. And that's been the question about Unique Ngakoue since he's gotten here. Like, when are the sacks going to come? When are the sacks going to come? And Wink Martindale has talked about that ad nauseum. But I think that to your point here, like the first half, he had a lot of pressures. And it's just that finishing that's not there, but he's still making Baker get the ball out. And Baker, to his credit, especially on the one, made a really great play. But the pressure is still there. The sacks are what people look for, but I feel like even last or 2 years ago, you look at Matthew Judon, there was no sacks, and that was just a huge question mark there. And then he rips off a game where there's 3 against the Raiders. So I think it's just those numbers will come, but he was certainly in Baker's face for much of that first half.
Yes, and Ngakoue had 5 pressures that I scored it. He had another quarterback hit, and he had another pressure that was wiped out on a penalty, the offensive pass interference penalty, I think. So it was a fine game for Ngakoue. It might be his best game yet, though the strip fumble is going to be hard to beat. He did have a lot of impact on this game, and he does a lot of complementary things well. He's like Wolf as an under guy on stunts in a different way because he fans out that tackle so far. It creates a gaping B gap the Ravens can use for stunts and blitzes and other things that will help them get after the quarterback in different ways. So I love the way he rushes the quarterback. I think it's highly complimentary what they do. And I actually think in this game, he certainly created enough pressure to justify what the Ravens paid to get him. And hopefully down the stretch, that'll continue.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Why don't I want to talk a little bit more about the pass rush here. They rushed 5+ on 22 of 48. That's 46% above their season average. They're still using numbers to pressure Mayfield. They were much more effective rushing 5+ than they were rushing 6 in this game. So when they rushed 5+, when they rushed 4 or fewer, they gave up 9.3 yards per play. When they rushed 5+, they gave up 4.6 yards per play, including the only turnover. So big difference there, obviously, rushing numbers. Mayfield's not a guy who likes to be moved around in that pocket.
Yeah, and their offensive line has been playing lights out this year. I mean, Harbaugh talks about that's the huge difference between this week and week 1 when we saw the Browns. You know, their offensive line has stayed healthy, which is such a luxury, especially when you have great running backs like they do. And they've been able to protect him this year. I mean, you look, he hadn't had an interception in the last 5 games, I believe. So he's had time, to make those good decisions. And besides the Tyus Bowser one this week, obviously, but I think their Browns offensive line has been a huge part of that. And it was a great battle for our defense for sure.
Yeah, that's the best offensive line in football. The Ravens don't have a better offensive line they're going to have to fear facing come, the weeks ahead, the 8 weeks ahead, we hope, leading into February. The Ravens used a fair amount of deception. I want to just blitz by this really quickly. 13 blitzes from off the line of scrimmage, 13 stunts. They did a fair amount of that. When you have a quarterback like Mayfield, you have more time to stunt. Look in the article if you want more details about that. 9 drops, that's simulated pressure where they had 2+ dropping from the line of scrimmage. They wove that together a fair amount in this game. Much more detail in the article. I'd point you to that. Cassie, I want to talk about individual players, and you're the guest here, but what we usually do is you come up with one player you really want to talk about, what you liked about their game, and then I'll do one, and we'll alternate.
I mean, if we're talking defense here, I'm going to have to go with Marlon Humphrey right off the bat. I know I'm biased, but I just don't understand why he's not getting any Defensive Player of the Year buzz. I know there's a lot of guys having great seasons around the NFL, but he set a franchise record this week for forced fumbles in a season. That extension is looking really good right about now. I'm so happy to already have him locked down. He's actually the only player in the NFL right now to have 2 forced fumbles this season already. And I just think that more fumbles, obviously, than any Ravens defender in team history. And he's a cornerback, and there's still 3 games left, so he's not done yet. That fruit punch, he talks about how he watches film on Charles Tillman and the peanut punch. And I think he's going to go down, that's going to go down in history as his thing someday too. Like there are being players watching film now, looking to Marlon Humphrey to just getting that hand in there and forcing the ball out. Unfortunately, this game, those forced fumbles weren't recovered by the Ravens as they have been so gloriously in some other games this year. But I just think that just having a young talent like that already locked up, I think he's one of the, if not the best top corners in football right now. Love watching him play. Love the energy that he brings. He's just he's a fun guy to watch, and he's out there having fun. I loved after the Tyus Bowser interception, you could see even on the broadcast him screaming and running after Tyus, just so excited. He's like a kid out there having fun, and watching Marlon Humphrey play football gives me joy. And I'm just so excited that he's going to be in a Ravens uniform.
Yeah, he really looks like he's a great teammate on the field. The 8 forced fumbles, he's only 2 shy of the NFL record right now. They haven't been keeping that for very long, 21 years, but Tillman had 10, and 2 other guys had 10 who are pass rushers. Osi Umenyiora is one of them, and I forget who the other one is. But that's not out of range, and his total is already the 7th highest in NFL history, of course, since they've been keeping those records. Marlon Humphrey did a lot of other great things in this game that were not maybe as recognized. Mayfield dropped back 48 times. How many times was Marlon Humphrey targeted? 3 out of all those. So that tells you the kind of respect he gets. One of them was a PD. Another one, there was an overthrow out of bounds down the left sideline to Higgins. So it wasn't like he gave up a bunch of passes in order to get those forced fumbles. It was fairly remarkable. In fact, one was Smith's target that he came and got the forced fumble on. One of the interesting plays of the game, obviously, he gave up the touchdown to Hunt at the end of the game. And there's something interesting going on there because it was a cover 3 play that got busted. I had a little talk with a PFF guy about this today, but one of the points he made is that Board, who would have had underneath coverage responsibility on that side, actually had to follow that seam route a little bit deeper, respect that, and that meant Humphrey had to come up and take the Hunt in the shallow zone. But in so doing, he had to make a difficult tackle in space. One of the things you do to give yourself a better chance there is to take leverage to one side because you know your teammate is going to help you. So in his case, despite the fact it looks really silly, he took outside leverage on Hunt, closer to the sideline, to try and force that ball back towards where he thought the tackler would be. You could see Humphreys upset at the end of that play, kind of palms out to Board, but Board apparently, what he did after he released the seam route was not to come back to be in the right position to make that tackle. Humphrey was kind of upset about that pretty clearly.
Yeah, it looked like there's a little miscommunication there. So that's definitely one I think they'd both like to have back. But, hindsight's 20/20 on that one.
There you go. I'll take a player. I'll go with Tyus Bowser. Obviously, we talked about his interception. I think one of the things that's going unnoticed is he's really played better in the run game this week. And he took on tight ends in particular very effectively. I have some good notes in the article if you want to go see that. They use him so often to cover. You'll often see, situations where he seems to be covering a wide receiver where you would not normally expect that. But there was a play late in the third quarter where Chuck Clark actually signaled for him to be in a certain shallow zone position where Landry converted on 4th and 4. That was unfortunate. But otherwise, I thought he was absolutely outstanding. Had pressure in the game. He had a couple of nice edge setting plays on the left side. Just overall, just another outstanding game, and the interception obviously was the crown jewel.
He's been a guy I just have been waiting for until this season to have those breakout games. Ever since he came to the Ravens, he's been the one that's last in the locker room, getting treatment, doing all the right things, taking care of his body. You'll see him going out and getting in extra work, all those kinds of little things that are going to add up someday. And I'm just so happy to see them kind of paying off now. And I've been talking about him all season long. I just think he's having a fantastic year and really excited to see where his career takes him from here. Because every year it was just, you'd hear Coach Harbaugh and Wink say Tyus, he's right there, and you're just waiting for him to break through and make a play. And now he's finally, I think it's just a comfort level in the defense, knowing, all the schemes a little better now that he's been here for a few years and having that comfort, the confidence to go out and make a play and having that kind of, instinct that comes with experience.
He was, I think a lot of people at least perceived that he was being put in the same class as Tim Williams. Now, Tim Williams had some issues with learning special teams and some issues, I think, also probably with some attitude and work ethic things. Did you ever perceive that to be the case with Bowser, that early on in his career, he maybe had more of that?
I think you're right. I think there was a point where he was kind of being lumped in that category just based on discussions, on the record, quotes from coaches. But I think it was never an attitude or work ethic problem with Tyus. I think it was just, again, to kind of how I said earlier, waiting for him to kind of be able to make that jump to kind of feel the game a little better. And Tyus is definitely not one you'll ever hear people complain about his attitude or his work ethic. And I think that it did end up being an issue in the other case. And obviously that person's no longer with the team. So I think that is very telling. But Tyus, I think they're very excited to see him make that jump. And I think that's a credit to what he did this offseason, having to do the offseason program on your own. It's a lot that falls on you, and the guys had to come in and be ready. And I think that he has shown that he was ready, he did the work this offseason on his own. He got there. And I think that's definitely paying off.
Yeah, a fourth-year player, if you can't afford to invest in your own career as a fourth-year player,
Right.
I can't help you, fella, because there's been now a succession of Ravens players who've done a very good job with that. Obviously, Zadarius Smith falls into that category,
Mm-hmm.
but Ryan Jensen was a big tub of goo before his fourth season, and he went to that offseason program and he leaned down, worked very hard, got in great shape, got a 4-year, $42 million contract at center with basically one good starting season. I mean, if you can't do that for yourself, if you can't invest for yourself to that matter, boy, can't help you.
Right. You got to make your money at that point. It's on you. Then when you're on that rookie deal, it behooves the team to keep you until it doesn't. And once you're up, you're not going to pay you if you haven't shown out. And yeah, I love that. I love Zadarius Smith having success up in Green Bay too. He was definitely a fun one to work with. So it's good to see that, sometimes those guys go into other teams. They don't have the same success that they've had at the Ravens, but he has definitely lit it up there the last 2 years.
Yeah, we'd like the ones who go to the NFC. We probably are okay with that happening. If they're going into their AFC scene,
Exactly.
All right, your turn. You have another player you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's go Marcus Peters. I'm going to stick with the cornerback duo here. I think when healthy, this is the best corner duo in the NFL. I don't think there's really any question in my admittedly slightly biased mind. I think we talked about it earlier. He's obviously been struggling with some injuries throughout this season, but just the attitude, again, I referenced that running back out onto the field, when he wasn't even cleared to be out there, but he was going to go make a play. And I just think his toughness, and his mindset for the game, I love that. I love having him out here. They're just the duo. I'll always go back to, especially when we're talking the Browns here, when he signed that extension with the Ravens and Jarvis Landry responded to the NFL's tweet about the extension. And I think he said something like, "Oh, goody," or like, "Can't wait to," basically joking that he was excited to get to face this guy twice a season. And Marcus Peters has a dub in both of them this year. So, Jarvis Landry is obviously a great talent, but you look at his stat sheet from the 2 games against the Ravens, and he's Baker's go-to guy, and the Ravens have done a great job covering him. But I just love having the Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey duo out there, especially, like we talked about, Jimmy Smith is obviously battling some injuries, but when healthy, the secondary is just top notch. But I think Marcus, that trade last year in the middle of the year,
Legacy CRM platforms have made you compromise for far too long. With HubSpot's CRM platform, you don't have to choose between enterprise tools that are powerful or easy to use. It gives you both, so your marketing, sales, and service teams can align with ease, accelerate sales, and anticipate every customer need. Finally, there's a CRM platform that helps you run better so you can grow better, without complexity ever getting in the way. Learn more at HubSpot.com.
At Zenni, you get the same quality frame and lens options that you'd get from an optician for 1/10 of the price, including blue blockers, progressives, prescription sunglasses, and more. The best part? Try on any frame, anywhere with our 3D virtual try-on. Zenni.com. Eyewear for everyone.
I give DaCosta a lot of credit for that one because I think that he has just been a game changer for this Ravens defense out there.
Yeah, fantastic trade. I don't think anyone would dispute that at all. Just great value. And then they got him at a pretty good price, I think, for 3 years, a very reasonable price on the contract. And even with COVID dollars on the cap, it's not a contract that I regret in any way. I mean, I love the contracts on the books. If we want to talk about Jimmy Smith for a second, because you just mentioned him, obviously didn't get a whole lot of play out of him in this game. I know he's working like hell to get on the field and stay on the field. What Jimmy Smith has done for this team this year in terms of his flexibility to play safety, to cover a tight end, to do the other things that they've asked him to do early in the year, just to play the back end in a dime roll and allow Clark to move up front and have a third safety so that they could be an effective dime unit early in the year. Then moving to outside corner again with not a reasonable expectation, frankly, that he'd still be any good at being one of the best in the league again when he was healthy at that position, I think is remarkable. And even if this season ends up with him playing spottily down the stretch, I think we really need to appreciate just what a value Jimmy Smith has been to this team, this franchise, the last few years, and this year in particular.
Absolutely. If we can get some snaps out of Jimmy every game, even if they have to limit them just to keep him healthy and keep him out there, I think that's definitely valuable. I mean, the dude is just his athleticism, again, I don't know what the word for it, the humility, I guess, of being a veteran guy like he is. You could have gone somewhere else in the offseason, maybe gotten more playing time, maybe it wouldn't have worked out. But, I think that that just is a credit to Jimmy and who Jimmy is. He's a teammate. He's going to do whatever this defense needs him to do, to your point. And just, again, credit to Wink for, being able to use his unique skill sets in different ways. But I just think that, again, he's just just an asset to this team. And just even having him in the locker room, he just brings so much knowledge to the secondary that I think he's valuable. And hopefully that he can still be making plays, even if they have to use him in limited opportunities going through the rest of this season.
All right. Let's talk a little mailbag for a second. I'm going to talk my defensive MVPs. By the way, if you have three, you want to say we can go 3-1, or I'll just talk about mine if you have roughly the same list.
No, yeah, I liked your list. That's cool with me.
Okay, so number 3, Pernell McPhee. We talked about what he did. A lot of pressure in this game. Also set the edge well against the run. The one thing we didn't mention about McPhee when we talked about him is the Ravens cut down on his snaps in their 4 outside linebacker package. He's normally always a part of that. But they cut down in this game because they needed him more as an edge setter. And, he's adapted from being a pass rusher exclusively to an edge setter also, and he did it all in this game. So great, 2 quarterback hits early, 2 other pressures, lots of good edge setting notes. Go see the article if you want to see them. Tyus Bowser, we both mentioned, obviously, multiple times in this show. Great game here. And Marlon Humphrey's number 1 in this one for me. Everything. Forced fumbles, offensive pass interference drawn, everything else he did. My defensive MVPs, anything to say about those guys?
I'll add something about Marlon.
Go.
He's just a baller. At the end of the day, he's just going to make a play. He goes out and balls. And Wink Martindale always says that Marlon could have balled out in any era. And I think that's so true. I think he'd be hard-pressed to find a game where he wouldn't be the defensive MVP. So he's just going to go out there and ball.
Yeah, he's a very physical guy. He could have easily played 1970s cornerback and been the Mel Blount of that era. So,
absolutely.
What do you have for us, Josh?
All right, we got a very full mailbag today. For some reason, people were paying attention to this game and watching it.
That's good.
So, all right, we're going to try to focus on the defensive side. So first up is about Jordan Richards. Is he that valuable on special teams for the Ravens that it's worth deactivating an extra DL or DB last night?
I think that Mark Ingram is the first guy on the chopping block when it comes to that. So we talked a little bit about it earlier. What do you think, Cassie?
I mean, the Ravens love their special teams guys. That's always been a staple, that if a guy really is that valuable on special teams, I think that's the question, But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what that happens with that going forward.
Christian Welch played 19 snaps. He's a core special teamer who's in there. You don't see it all on defense. The guy who you might legitimately make a case for being cut on special teams is Prochet. He only had 2 punt return snaps. He doesn't do anything else on this team right now. He's hardly been used as a wide receiver. So if you wanted to make a case for somebody else to be deactivated, I think it would be Ingram first and then Prochet. I don't think this team can really afford to have 4 running backs and only 4 corners going forward.
Yeah, Prochet has made some good decisions back there, but you're right. I think there are guys that might be capable of carrying that load going forward.
All right. What do you attribute to the pre-snap chaos that we saw on the defensive side of the ball this week? Was it the Browns' tempo or something else going on?
Okay, so they had 12 on the field once. They had 10 on the field when...
And don't forget 15.
15.
Yeah, that's how they counted it up. It may have been 15 at the snap, may not have been. In any case, it was very bad. They had 10 on the field when the Browns had a false start. So that was an unusual kind of thing too. The Ravens have, unfortunately, they've been playing shorthanded with some regularity on both offense and defense the last couple of years. A high substitution defense like Wink's, which can serve snaps, will occasionally find themselves in this position where they just don't get the signal done quickly enough, or they don't get the exchange done quickly enough that they get the right number of players on the field.
Right. And I think you add in some of the late game injuries there and, shuffling guys in and out, who's actually available to play. It just kind of adds up to a lot of confusion.
All right. What's the base zone coverage that Wink has been calling? And with talented corners, why have they moved away from press man coverage?
Well, I think we saw more press man in this game, but basically they're trying to play zone when they have a lead like they did against Dallas. They give up a ton of yardage to Dallas on medium range passes that weren't big plays. So you have a lot of 10, 11, 12-yard throws while they led by 17, for example, in that game. It was just good football strategy to do that. And I don't think that anybody could look at what Dallas did on offense and really say they beat the crap out of the Ravens. They did have 29 first downs, but they're forced to go down the field at a very methodical pace. And the Ravens really controlled the pacing of that game in the second half. Other times when they want to get the blitz going, they are happy to get up and play some press man, and they did in this game some.
All right, let's close it out with Connor's question. With only 3 games left and hopefully of lesser opponents is what we're assuming, do you think the Ravens should rest Campbell and Jimmy Smith to get them ready for some postseason?
You want to take this one, Cassie?
Sure. That's a tricky one. I think it's really going to come. I could go either way. I'm battling in my mind back and forth because I want them healthy for the playoffs 100%, but I also want to get to the playoffs, and we're not really in a position where we can be making strategies for the playoffs when we're not there yet. You look back to last year and sure, we were able to rest guys in the season and get them healthy because the playoffs had already been locked in, but that AFC race is very up for grabs right now, and it could go so many different ways and I think if I'm Calais Campbell or I'm Jimmy Smith, and I am sure they are this way this week, they want to be out there. They're not going to be cool with sitting if they're able to go. Again, like we talked about earlier, I'd expect limited snaps for them going forward, but using them in key moments where their experience and expertise is valuable, and their talent. I think that that's what we'll see going forward. But they're going to be fighting to be out there for sure.
That's a great point. I think the limited snaps is certainly something that Martindale can handle because he's been so good as a substitution defense. And in Jimmy Smith's case, if you really want to keep Jimmy out of the game but keep him as a viable weapon that you have on the bench, go ahead and don't start him. I mean, that option is available. I said at the beginning of the season I didn't really want them playing him at safety, even though that versatility ended up being very valuable, because I thought he was too valuable as the 4th cornerback. It's still the thing still applies now. If you've got Jimmy Smith as your 4th corner and he can still play and he's on your bench, then he's the ace of spades sitting on the bench. That's wonderful. I want that.
I think every team would love to have Jimmy Smith as their 4th corner.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the mailbag. Now we got a whole bunch of offensive questions, so we'll get into that tomorrow. Cassie, thanks for joining us. What can we plug and promote for you?
Oh, well, thanks for having me, guys. You can catch me on the show every week on the Ravens Instagram and Snapchat and website. And, hit me up on Twitter. I love talking to the fans. One of my most favorite parts of the job is getting to interact with all of you all. And I really appreciate both of you for having me on here tonight. It was a lot of fun.
Well, if it's all interacting with the fans, I'm assuming this week the show is all going to be about running to the bathroom.
Yeah, a lot of bathroom humor this week, so that'll be a fun one for sure.
That's going to be around for the rest of his life. I don't think he'll elevate above this very easily. It's just something that's going to be part of who he is now. Anyway,
he's got to embrace it and sell the T-shirt.
Absolutely, I'm sure he will. He's got that great marketing mind. They always capitalize on those opportunities, so I have no doubt.
Cassie, thanks so much for joining us here. It's a pleasure to have you. You have so much great inside the organization information. Really have appreciated this conversation, and also what you know about football. Just fantastic. Appreciate you guys so much. Thanks again.
All right. And Ken, so this week we've got a full week of shows, normal schedule pretty much as we all get ready for Sunday. Offensive breakdown tomorrow.
The offensive breakdown will be tomorrow. The Know Your Foe, the day after that, we have a great guest, Lori Fitzpatrick from the Jaguars, who we're really looking forward to. Maybe somebody even Cassie knows. And then on Thursday, we have the, Friday, actually, By the Numbers with Dan Reese.
All right. And then check out Section 336. It's a new episode out there now, and now's the time to get on board with the Orioles and start to learn some of these young names.
Like Chris Davis, who's still going to be with the team?
He is not apologizing for that contract. But Ken, I could have told you, I'm down here near Jacksonville. I can tell you everything that's going on with the Jags down here. Everyone cares about Minshew, and that's about it.
That's right.
He's coming back. They're all excited.
They're all excited about that. Okay.
Yeah. So don't know why, but that's the tone down here. So, all right. Well, we will talk again on Film Study.
Two kinds of bacon and all kinds of delicious. Say hello to Donato's new Bacon Duo pizzas. 2 pizzas, each with 2 kinds of bacon. Try the new Pepperoni Bacon Duo with pepperoni, Canadian bacon, and hardwood smoked bacon. And the Chipotle Bacon Duo with Canadian bacon and Chipotle seasoned bacon. Now get $2 off a large Bacon Duo or any large pizza. Use promo code 2. Donato's. Every piece is important.
What you doing?
Trying on glasses with Zenny's 3D virtual try-on.
Wow, that's pretty cool. But those glasses kind of make you look like your Uncle Bob.
Oh, not exactly the look I was going for. Okay, how about these clear glasses? Oh, or these round ones?
Very on trend. I like both on you.
You know, I also like these aviator sunglasses.
Wait, are those the actual prices? I say get all of them.
Seriously, why not, right?
Oh, now I want new glasses.
Zenni.com. Quality prescription glasses starting at $6.95.